Hello BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. So I've been working on these 4 books this week. The Complete Stories of Oz by L. Frank Baum. In particular, finished up Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz, or rather reviewed it, and then started The Road to Oz. The Fellowship of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Histories by Herodotus, translated by Tom Holland. And the Grammar Book by Marianne, Celce-Murcia and Diane, Larsen-Freeman. So yeah, it's not been a great week reading-wise. Although I think my page number count actually is not the worst week I've had this year in terms of page number counts. But certainly in terms of leisure time, it's been a week where I felt like time has been very limited for a number of reasons regarding a family crisis and work and school. I'm doing an online course at the moment. So yeah, between all of those, I just snuck the reading in where I could. That being said, though, I did waste some time this week. You know, like there were some times when I was trying to get into the mindset for doing my homework for this online course or preparing my lessons for work, that I would just waste time on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. So I said this last week, but wasting time on social media continues. It has been an issue of mine for a number of years and continues to eat into my reading time. So that's something, I've been saying this for years, but that's something I really want to try and remedy, or at least cut down on, and move that extra time over towards reading. However, as it was this week, unfortunately, as with last week, these 2 books, I made barely any progress at all. So Herodotus, I just got 4 pages done, which is what I got done last week. I was making good progress on this book for a while. And now I've just slowed to a crawl on it, which I regret, because I do enjoy it every time I pick it up. But it does take me a long time to get through anything, because I'm constantly checking the maps in the back, constantly checking the endnotes in the back, occasionally going to Wikipedia to check this or that. So I'm on book 4 now, which is talking about the Persian conquest of Libya. And it's still, I believe, part of the backstory gearing up towards Darius's conquest of Libya, talking about a previous conquest of Libya. And then, as Herodotus is so famous for doing, it goes into ethnography, where he talks about the different tribes who live, or the different peoples who live in Libya. And yeah, it's just classic Herodotus. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here. Particularly talking about the different sexual practices of the different people, which is something that Herodotus seems interested in, and it's more interesting than like an account of their monetary policies or something. I think to most people. So just in the 4 pages I read this week, what do we have? Yeah. So he's talking about a certain people who are beyond the borders of Egypt, and those are Adramycadae. I think it's not entirely clear, but I think a lot of these people are of Greek origin, because I guess this was the time that the Greeks were colonizing, sending different colonies out all over the Mediterranean. Adramycadae certainly looks like a Greek name, huh? Anyways, it says their women wear a bronze bangle on each ankle. What's a bangle? And an anklet, right? They also grow their hair very long, and should one of them ever find lice on herself, she will get her own back by biting on the lice and tossing them to one side. Actually, that wasn't the passage I thought that was. There was one passage here where it talks about how the women wear anklets to signify how many men they've slept with. Oh, here it is. That's on the next page. Next to the Masii are the Gindanes, whose women all wear lots of leather anklets. The reason for this, so the story goes, is that each time a woman sleeps with a man, she will fasten a band around her ankle. Accordingly, it is the woman who has the most anklets who is held in the highest esteem, on the grounds that no one has had more men make love to her than she. And then the right opposite that on the previous page, something I skipped over here, talking about the Nasamonian people. It says, when a Nasamonian first gets married, it is the custom for his bride to spend the wedding night working her way through all the guests. Each man, once he has slept with her, will then give her a present, whatever he may have brought with him from his own house. So, these kind of details are what makes Herodotus so interesting to read. I doubt if any of that was true. Now, granted, I did pick out the most salacious details from his ethnography. So, but, yeah, even so, I doubt whether this is true. But it's interesting stuff, I guess. Where it gets a little bit difficult to work through is, this whole section, these whole 4 pages I read, it's just one paragraph after another detailing these people do this, and these people do this, and these people do this. So the forward momentum of his plot is completely dead. So it's not like you're like, well, I've got to keep turning the pages to find out what happens to this guy. There's none of that. It's just like, oh, okay, that was interesting, pleasant. Gave me something to think about. Yeah, that and fiddling with all the maps in the back. There's another story. Jason and the Argonauts gets mixed in here again. I say again because I talked about this a couple weeks ago as well, with another people. According to legend, they were sailing with a tripod. Here he goes. The story goes that Triton made an appearance and ordered Jason to give you the tripod. Ordered Jason to give him the tripod. I will show you the route out, he says. The route out is they were stuck in the shallows of a lake because they got blown off course. I will show you the route out and send you on your way unharmed. This was good enough for Jason, and so Triton duly guided the ship's crew through the shallows. The tripod he put in his own shrine, but only after he had first declaimed a prophecy over it and shared the full details with Jason and his men. Should any descendant of a crew member on the Argo carry off this tripod, he declared, it is an utter certainty that 100 Greek cities will be founded along the lake. The local Libyans, when they heard this, hid the tripod. Just interesting mixing in these mythology with his history. I've probably talked way too much about this, given that I've only read 4 pages. The other one where I only read 4 pages was the grammar book. And I'm still on the section with imperatives. And here are some sentence trees with how imperatives are formed. There's some interesting stuff in here, as there always is once you get into the nuts and bolts of this book. Talking about the different different uses or different exceptions to the normal rules. So ordinarily, imperatives don't have a subject, or they have understood you as the subject. But they did say that there are sometimes when you can use somebody or anybody as the subject, like somebody open the door, or don't anybody move. But you can't use a person's name as an imperative. So you can't say, Jim, open the door. Now, I know what you're thinking. Obviously, you can say, Jim, open the door. But they go into a little detail here, and they said that when you use it that way, it's actually a vocative. A vocative, I think, is the Latin term or the grammatical term for addressing somebody. Like, oh, Jim, would you open the door? And they said because of the intonation that's being used, you can tell it's not a part. You can tell it's the vocative, and not the subject of the sentence. So if you say Jim, open the door, or if you say Jim, you open the door, it's the same kind of up down on Jim, which is characteristic of the vocative. Therefore, we can tell that when you say Jim, open the door, that Jim is not the subject of the imperative, that Jim is the vocative, and the subject is still an understood you. So those kinds of things are why I'm glad I'm reading this book. Although, as I've said many times, I'm not sure how much of this is going to be my long-term memory after I finish it. But lots of little details like that. Again, unfortunately, I only got 4 pages in. But an interesting 4 pages. Going to be attempting to read more in the future. And then the Complete Stories of Oz book. So on my weekly reading vlog last week, I had already finished Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, but I hadn't gotten around to reviewing it yet. I reviewed it and posted the review on Monday. It was a buddy reads with Dane Reed, so you can check out my review, or you can check out his review. His review is much shorter. His review is a nice, crisp, clean 5 minutes. My review is 30 minutes of rambling. So you can take your pick. I've linked to his review in my review. And then starting up on The Road to Oz, which is now the 5th book in this series. Now, previously, on my previous attempt to get through this book, I did read the first 5 books and got, I don't know, about halfway through the 6th book before my interest petered out a bit. Now that I'm going through it again with the intent this time of actually finishing the thing, I think I'm beginning to remember why my interest was petering out here. I'm finding The Road to Oz a little bit of a slog, to be honest, which I think is how I remember it the first time. There's not really any stakes. They encounter a lot of strange things, but, well, I don't know. They do encounter some dangers. I'm a little bit annoyed by another inconsistency here, which in the previous book, it's established that every day at 4 o'clock, Ozma was looking at Dorothy, so that she could wish her back to Oz with a magic belt if Dorothy ever wished to go. Which in the previous book made me think, well, okay, why did we just think about that at the end of the book? Why haven't we been thinking about that the whole way through? Now we're in another situation where Dorothy and her friends are going through all these obstacles and dangers on the way to Oz. over a period of several days, and I'm thinking, well, why doesn't why doesn't she just signal Ozma as they agreed that she would? And I don't remember if there was an in-book explanation for that. The rules about the magic belt seem to change from book to book, so we'll see how it turns out at the end. Again, I don't remember it. There are some queer creatures in here, as there are in every Oz book. I don't know. I'm finding my enthusiasm is lagging a little bit, which is right about where my enthusiasm started to lag off the last time. But this time I am committed to actually getting through this book. And then once I get through this book, I don't know what I'm going to do. If I'm going to attempt to track down the other books in the Oz series or what. But definitely committed to getting through this. And then the Fellowship of the Rings. So I read from page 176 to 250, so 74 pages. That's actually not bad for me, since my reading pace. So this chunk right here. Yeah, so I'm assuming most people are familiar with the plot just because of the movie. Well, because it's a very well-known book that a lot of people have read, for one thing. And then if you haven't read it, I'm relatively sure you've seen the movie. This is, as I've mentioned before, my second time through this. I did it 20 years ago as an audiobook. This time I'm actually physically reading it. And I'm remembering some of the things that frustrated me when I did this as the audiobook. One is the extremely slow pace of it. But again, now that I know that, and now that I know a little bit more about what Tolkien was trying to do, I'm adjusting my expectations for it. He's spending a lot of time describing the geography. You know, they go down this hill and they go through this piece of woods and they go across this marsh. So it's very much an immersive reading experience where you're trying to picture the landscape that he's describing. And of course, when you're watching the movie does all the work for you. But when you're reading the book, you've got to try and visualize these landscapes yourself. And this is something I'm bad at. It's maybe something I was always bad at, but something I was always not good at. But I think the internet and YouTube and just constantly watching videos has not helped me over the years to develop this skill of taking in a description and not having your eyes glaze over as you read through the description of the landscape and just actually picturing it. And I think that's what you need to do with a book like this. I'm realizing more so than I did that the point of this book is not the plot. The point of this book is just to feel yourself in this landscape. This kind of mythical, ancient landscape, which is... yeah, so there's a couple things going on. It's romanticizing the old world. So, you know, this old place where there are castles and ruins of castles and ancient burial tombs and legends of ancient kings and very much that kind of stuff. But it's also equally romanticizing nature. Although maybe romanticizing is maybe the wrong word, because they're going through very dark and gloomy forests and marshes and stuff like that, but definitely making you feel or picture the natural environment. And I confessed in my original video when I started this series, to being somebody who tried to get into these books years ago and couldn't see the appeal of what the diehard fans loved about it. But I'm starting to think the appeal is, again, not the plot, but just feeling like you're living in this world, which is described in such detail. Although if I do have a complaint, it's that the maps in the back are not big enough. They could do with being a lot bigger. I find myself squinting at the maps, trying to... I mean, sometimes you can ignore them, but this is one of those books where you get the feeling that the author really wants you to be following along on the map, because he's describing in such detail the twists and turns that their journey is taking. I don't know if my eyesight is going or if I need another prescription on my glasses, but I find myself squinting at these and not being able to read out all the small print here. I think, I don't know, I think other editions of this same book have larger maps in some of them. Is that right? Yeah, anyways, the other thing I remember from years ago was this feeling like the ring wraiths were built up to be such fearsome creatures. You know, like they're so terrible, and everyone's talking about how afraid they are. And then the ring wraiths follow them forever without really doing anything. They're always around, they're always lurking just around the edges. But the wraiths never attack, or I think they come close to attacking later. But, just in the section I read for this week, they're in an inn, and Pippin, I think is his name. Was it Pippin or Mary? Maybe it was Mary. Goes out to take the air, and he encounters one of the ring wraiths, and he faints. But then other people just pick him up again, and he's all right. I had a hard time reconciling the fearsome menace these ring wraiths were referred to as in the book with how little they actually did. And that was something I remember from the audio, doing this as an audiobook 20 years ago. It was something that also bugged me when I saw the Peter Jackson movie. Because I was thinking, okay, well, maybe seeing this on the movie screen will show me what how I should picture these ring wraiths as being fearsome. But it was the same thing. Maybe it was even worse in the movie, where again they were built up to be something so terrible, and yet they would just so slowly reach out, or they never could seem to find the hobbit, so they always seemed to be so easy to escape from, or so slow to attack. I think that complaint will continue as I go forward, because I think there's more ring wraiths following them to come. I also got to the part where they met Strider at the end. At the inn. And this is something, when I was doing the audiobook 20 years ago, I had trouble absorbing much of this on audiobook. So I wasn't quite sure who the Strider character was or where he came from. Also, as the book went on, I couldn't quite figure out why they were calling him Strider sometimes and Aragon sometimes. They if memory serves, there's a certain point where all of a sudden he becomes known as Aragon more often than Strider. I don't remember where that is. Maybe it might even be in the next book. But so far he's being referred to as Strider. I'm doing my best not to fall back on the visualizations from the Peter Jackson movies when I read this, and with mostly with success. Um, Partly because a lot of the characters seem to be different than Peter Jackson's portrayal of them. I mean, Strider, I think in the book he doesn't really have the same vibe as he does in the movies. So it's why doesn't he have the same vibe? I don't know. I have trouble putting my finger on it, and I probably need to rewatch the movie. But yeah, I think he in the book he feels much more like a forest ranger, which is his character. But you really feel like he's this character who's spent a lot of time outside and he knows all the forest paths, and he's lived out on the edge of society for so long, which I don't think you got that same vibe in the movie. The other thing, actually, now that I'm talking about the movie, which I shouldn't because it's been like so long since I've seen the movies that I should rewatch those before I talk about them. But yeah, I think in the movie, I don't know how this is going to develop. Maybe it'll change by the time I get to the end of the trilogy. But I remember, again, doing this as audiobook 20 years ago and being a little bit confused by who these characters Merry and Pippin were and where they came from. They just seemed like they were along on the book, but they seemed like such non-entities. And then I watched the Peter Jackson movie, and the characters of Merry and Pippin were so colorful and so obviously the comic relief. I thought to myself, how did I miss those characters when I was reading the book? But now that I'm back reading the book again, I'm not exactly sure what the difference in characterization is between Merry and Pippin and Frodo. I mean, Sam is portrayed as somebody who's feels himself a little bit beneath the others. Like Sam is kind of naturally the servant to the other three. But as far as the other three go, I mean, especially Merry and Pippin seem to me fairly interchangeable. I don't know, maybe Merry is a little bit more independent than Pippin is, but there's really not a lot of characterization in this book. As come to think of it, there wasn't a lot in the Hobbit. So again, we'll see how that changes as I work through the trilogy, but I'm beginning to suspect that a lot of the very vibrant personalities these characters had on screen were Peter Jackson trying to give each character a gimmick. And I don't know, maybe that was the wrong word, vibrant personalities they had on screen. Maybe it was more like gimmicky personalities they had on screen. But they were, I think they were more memorable on screen. And again, we'll see. We'll see once I finish the trilogy if I still hold that opinion. Anyways, that's enough rambling for one video. I'm going to shut things off here, and then I will see you later in the week.